Welcome to the Sales Compensation Show, where we share the latest sales performance research, insights, and solutions through in-depth discussions with industry experts. So put that spreadsheet away, grab a beverage, and enjoy the conversation. I'm your host, Justin Lane. It is my pleasure and honor to welcome to the show Shiv Walia. Shiv is a skillful business professional with a history in working in wellness, SaaS, and computer technology industries. Currently, he is the Global Sales Compensation Senior Manager and Sales Operation Manager of Mindbody, a wellness and fitness company focused on providing innovative and intuitive solutions for wellness seekers and providers. Shiv, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, I'm familiar with Mindbody because I think I've purchased a few products over the years, workouts and different things. But for the people that maybe aren't familiar with Mindbody, can you tell us a little bit about the company and what are you folks up to in 2023?
Oh, yeah. So Mindbody provides management software for the fitness, beauty, and the wellness industry. Some of the big brands include like Orange Theory, F45. So whenever you go to a gym and spa, the software that they're using to schedule things and to figure out things in their system, that is the software we provide and geared specifically for this industry. What we're up to now, the newest thing that has happened is that we have merged with ClassPass. ClassPass is basically does the same thing, but it's more of a consumer-facing app, and it is an aggregator of gyms and spas and salons. So like think of it, if you want to try CrossFit or you want to try kickboxing, it's an app you go to and you check out, show me all these classes, all these fitness or spa classes that are in my city. So a combination of the two means that we are working on the customer side and the consumer side and making sure that all aspects of wellness, both physical and mental, are first and forefront for anybody who wants to do it. And we want everybody to do it. Our goal is to have wellness for everybody. So that's what's exciting in 2023.
All right. And then tell me a little bit about your current role at Mindbody. What are you responsible for with that title?
All right. Yeah. So I own the sales compensation team. I lead that team for our global sales team, and I run a team who is responsible for creating all the compensation plan, from designing it with our parent company. We are owned by Vista Equity Group. So in terms of anything, which obviously means that our strategy is made working with them. So from creating the comp plans to implementing it and making sure that all the pay, how we pay out, and all the structure is aligned with our company goals. And my team is the one that takes care of the non-enterprise sales reps. I manage the start to end of the enterprise team in terms of setting the quota and doing the monthly and quarterly calculations and making sure that at the end they get paid well. So, yeah.
How did you get involved in sales compensation?
Well, I actually started from sales operations. I did a lot of sales operations, and that is, as part of sales ops, it is where it's more like the back end of sales. It's making sure that the sales team have everything that they need to be successful in selling things. And from that, I think sales comp, it was one of the things which really excited me. One of the things that happened at first is that there was an opportunity, and it was going into a management role, and that's something I wanted. And I was like, all right, let me check this out. And it turned out that it's something that was like very interesting in terms of how you create the strategy and how you have like to work with all the different teams, because of course you're doing it for sales, but you gotta interface with the HR teams and PNC and finance, and that just kept it very interesting. So that's how I landed there.
I think from looking at your LinkedIn profile and resume that you've been involved in sales ops now for maybe 10 years, over a decade.
Yep.
How have you seen that role change over the last decade when it comes to sales compensation, quota, territories? I've seen evolution from my perspective, but tell me what you've seen.
Oh, yeah, yes. I would say like it has changed for sure. And it has changed for the better, especially seeing how sales comp was a decade ago, I would imagine back in the day, it was all about one thing. I want to create a compensation plan that is going to allow a sales rep to sell more and more of the product or service I'm selling. And that was the main goal. Now, I would say the greater focus of a good compensation plan is that it aligns with your strategy, the goals of the company, and what your objective is, all your financial goals, and even your non-financial goals. And there's definitely more of an emphasis on data-driven decision making. It's because we have a lot of analytics, a lot of new tools out there. We recently bought one Exactly tool, and we're going to start using that. And that just like gives you a lot more information you can work with and use to make better decisions. And that's been great. And the best thing, like one of those things which I find the most interesting and good that it happened, is that there is more of an emphasis in pay equity and pay transparency. And that's, from my perspective, has been a thing that hasn't been an issue, not just in tech or in corporate America, but all over the world. If you live in America and you follow soccer, I'm sure you must have heard that there's a big thing where the women's team were being paid way lower than the men's team. And if you know anything about those teams, the women's team was way more popular than the men's team. So that, like all these sorts of things, even I would say in the corporate world, a lot of times it has been found that a person who is a male person is getting paid more for the same job than a female coworker. So the fact that more pay equity and transparency is happening and it's at the forefront of things, it's exciting to be in this phase.
I'm glad you brought up the U.S. women's soccer team. I am the father of a soccer player that, and
nice.
She was a big fan of the women's team.
Uh-huh.
And so we definitely follow both national teams. I don't know if you saw the outcome. I recently wrote an article and put up on LinkedIn where in the last World Cup, the earnings from the performance-based earnings from the World Cup were shared evenly amongst the men's and women's teams, and vice versa will happen when the women play in the World Cup next cycle. So they're trying to, they've made it a lot more equitable for both teams. But it took the courts to come in and do so. Yeah.
It's been I think a couple of years that it's been in the news and everything. So perfect example.
Yeah. And in California, they recently passed a Pay Transparency Act, that requires, I think, pay ranges to be posted for jobs that, are going to be in California, Colorado, something similar. So I think we're getting there, to this idea, but it's still a little ways to go. Do you folks do any analysis of pay amongst the sales team to make sure that you're not adversely impacting any potential populations or groups?
Oh yes, absolutely. It's a big theme nowadays, and even as you said that, I was referring one of my friends to a non-sales job at our company, and I was looking at a job description myself after a very long time because I'm not looking for a job, and I was like, whoa, it had the pay range for each state, and I was like, that's new. 3 years ago, it's like make your guess. So yes, so across sales and non-sales, it is happening industry-wide, and we are definitely doing it. And also one of the things that made us do it is as we merged Mindbody and ClassPass, we made sure that we look at both companies. And one of the cool things we did is with a lot of the rules, we took the better of the two. Like if the LOA policy, if the leave of absence policy is better at ClassPass than Mindbody, we implemented theirs. And if we got more, say, national holidays and they got less, we give them the better of the two. So yeah, that's both these things, the industry standard and merging the two companies made us look into it, and we made sure that we have rules which are favorable for the team.
Let me ask you this. So you brought together a company, this idea of a platform sale to different companies that provide fitness experiences or classes to people that you go to, and then you acquire a company that does more sales to consumers. You mentioned, right, the idea of I pay a monthly fee and then I can go try a couple different classes. out. Does one sales force sell both those solutions to the market, or is it a B2B team and a B2C type team?
Yeah, great question. Right now, it's different. We have a B2B team that sells to the customer who are the people who run all the gyms and spas. And then we have a separate team, which is, well, it's not really, at the end of the day, they are both like selling to customers, right? The consumer is the one who is going on the app, but we are selling it to a company whom we want to be on ClassPass, but we are keeping those different still.
Oh, so interesting. So to the consumer, the idea of ClassPass is an app that I would download, and then
Yep.
if I'm signed up for one gym, maybe I can go check out different things. So you're selling that still to the gyms. Okay.
Yep.
Makes sense. In my mind, for some reason, I was thinking, oh, that's something I have to go. I go buy a subscription to LastPass from Mindbody. So are you folks on a calendar or fiscal year of some sort? Are you at the beginning of the year?
A calendar, yep. They just started calendar year.
Have you successfully rolled out the plans and quotas for the
Yes,
year?
we have. Yes, we have.
How did the process go, and what lessons did you learn that you might want to share to other people who maybe
Yes.
struggled with that this year?
Oh, yes. We definitely had a major change. We completely revamped our compensation plans to make sure that it aligns with what our goals are and where we're going. And the very first lesson, which I kind of learned the hard way, if I gotta be honest, is that you need to include all the stakeholders which are involved in compensation plan designing and implementation, because it's not just the sales team, but you got to make sure that you are aligned with the finance team, because at the end of the day, they need to create an expense that, if that's the plan, means that we are expecting to give out $XY million in sales compensation. And we need to make sure that we're accounting for that, and it still checks out in terms of the numbers. So include all the stakeholders and make sure that everybody's aligned. Definitely having a solid plan and structure, which one of the things that I do is that I make sure all the compensation plans are in one place, because they need to be accessed by different teams, right? By the team whom it's for, by the recruiting team for anyone who's new, or any team that is referencing it for whatever reason. So that is kind of, it's a rule that I'd follow with any project. And I would say, a very good thing to do is to communicate as much as you can. Like any other thing with sales, communication is key. Making sure that the sales team is aware of what is changing, how it's changing, and you take care of the change management. Anytime you're changing something, be it good or bad, if you don't look into change management, it might be just very rocky. So making sure that you are communicating all the changes to your sales teams, and they're aligned with your vision and agree that this is better for us is kind of what will get you to have a more positive, in terms of people being more positive that yes, it's a good plan, and I'm excited to achieve more this year.
A couple questions kind of as a follow-up. The first one being, you mentioned a big change in the plan, which is often difficult when it comes to that rollout and communication. You have to be a little bit more thoughtful and about it, how you go about it. How did Mindbody come to awareness that the plans were out of strategic alignment with the corporate goals? As a consultant, I talk to a lot of companies, and oftentimes when I bring this idea up, they're saying, oh, we want revenue growth, or we want market share, or we want to launch a new product. And I look at their plans and I'm like, well, that's not what you're paying people to do. How did that realization come to Mindbody? Was it the CEO said, we're changing direction, we need to change the plans? Was it because reps were leaving and making comments in exit interviews? Why I ask is, so how do other companies, how can they become aware that maybe their plans aren't in alignment with their goals?
A great question. I can see how that can be an important thing, like for anyone to think of. I think what helped me in this case is that I took over the global team, taking care of compensation for the global team 2 quarters ago. So I came in and I was looking at it from a fresh perspective. That means that I was looking at the plans which had been created by somebody else, and I knew, being in sales ops at that time, I knew what the company strategy is and what we're trying to achieve. And I think what helped me is that it was a new set of eyes in terms of how are we planning to pay them and what do we tell them in their day to day in terms of what we need from them. And I found a lot of things which are either too complex or are missing or could be done better. So that was one thing. And the second thing was like it was definitely the person before me had done a great job of having a lot of data. So had a ton of data and analytics. And I worked with the finance team to figure out how much we are spending in sales compensation, how much our return is, and where do we want to be. And that just as we got into a lot of detail, it was very easy to pick out both the low-hanging fruits where it's like, oh, that is like something we need to change immediately because it's bad, and even the more complex things that how are we doing so bad in this and why do we need to change it, and that's where you had like to involve a broader team and kind of look at the strategy. So that second part was just looking at a ton of data and seeing what can you find out that's wrong and what can you do to change it.
I'm glad you mentioned this idea of a sales compensation return on investment or a compensation cost of revenue type of metric. It is amazing how many companies don't know this number off the top of their heads on the finance side or on the sales operations side. And it's never something where I'm like, oh, when somebody tells me what it is, where I'm like, oh, that's good or bad. To me, it's you have to, that initial draw a line in the sand and then decide whether you're trying to increase it or decrease it, whether you're trying to respond to the market or you're trying to become more efficient or productive, type of thing. But if it's way out of whack, Q1 this year versus Q1 next year, something's gone wrong and it's, for further investigation. It's a wonderful metric for people to track. So let me ask you this question. So if everybody out there in the role today, as opposed to them finding a new person every 6 months to have a fresh set of eyes, what metrics are you going to put in place with this data that you have available to monitor plan effectiveness? And is it going to, is it staying in strategic alignment versus maybe getting back out of alignment or not working?
Great question. I think, that just reminds me of some of the things that we focused on. One is to make sure that, well, I think it started with the rev churn. That you gotta make sure that you are, one, your headcount is good, that you're not having too many extra people or too few who cannot even chase the goal. And that, in that you look at things like what is the average dollar value of your opportunities in your CRM and how much, again, one person bring in. If I go and I find out that on average, hypothetical numbers, our goal is to do 1 million, and each person on average has done 100,000 a year. That means that I do need 10 people, even if you cannot make it 5 people and say that, oh, I'm going to increase their productivity. Increasing productivity by a 2x number has probably never been done, like going from 100,000 to 200,000 within a year. So all the headcount numbers, that was something we definitely focused on. It's not really compensation related, but we did look at churn and making sure that if we reduce the number of businesses which are leaving, we kind of increase how much the total value that's coming in from one person, because of course you have to do both the plus and the minus. That means you're increasing their productivity. And one more thing we probably looked at is just stuff from the finance team. So not really compensation, but what is the total cost of the compensation team, and what are the drivers that we can pull and push that can help to make things better than what they are. Because we did see some numbers, I'm forgetting what the numbers are now, that were like very much unfavorable, that were not favorable to plan. And we worked with finance to figure out how can we do this from a finance perspective to have more green numbers.
Yeah, I typically guide people to say, put that, you don't want to make that a one-time report.
Oh, yeah.
because the data grows stale pretty quickly as time goes on. And I always think about the idea of, for a, let's say, a 2023 plan, people were doing these data polls late summer, early fall of 2022. And by the time you get to summer of 23, it's almost a year old. And so
That is true. Yeah.
if you don't already have it in place, and for the people listening, put your metrics in place, check them throughout the year, make course corrections as
Oh, yeah.
needed,
Definitely
proactively
have.
versus wait.
Yeah. I would encourage to have a quarterly view of the data that I think is important and need to track, and have one person or one team that is responsible for that. Because as time goes as well, that's one place you can look back at that, how did we manage this, or there's this number which hasn't improved from the last 8 quarters. Do we need to do something about it? So there can be things which are just really out there that you can easily see if you are doing a tracking which is continuous.
What are you seeing from your perspective, your network or organizations or communities that you belong to around, let's say, sales performance, sales comp, quotas, territories? What trends are you seeing out there in the marketplace today? And how are you responding to them?
One good trend I like is that there is a push to make more individualized compensation plans, and not just a one fits all. All right, the global sales team is going to be on this plan. And I'm not saying, I don't want someone to hear that and say that I'm not going to create a plan for 1,000 different sales reps. No, that's wrong. Of course, that's wrong. It's individualized in a way that you find a good level, which is that at this specific level, I feel like all this team needs to have the same plan, but their peers who are on another team or in another region or selling other products, they need to have a different plan. So making it personalized at a specific level that is going to motivate that team and drive them to achieve the highest efficiency is a good trend that's happening out there. And definitely the fact that it's more aligned. People are starting to align the compensation plan to what the company goal is. Because at times it can be, a good example is of seeing that at times if you sell some companies have a rule that if you sell a product or a service to an NGO or a nonprofit, you are paid on the list price. So it's encouraging you to sell to such businesses, because normally if you sell something at a discount, you are comped on the discounted price. But in such a case, they'll pay you on the list price, which is like to encourage you to work with such companies. So just, doing all things which will align with the strategy and what you're trying to achieve as a business. I think that's a good way to create comp plans nowadays.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And when I asked you a question earlier about what you've seen in the last 10 years, I'll share what I've seen in the last 20 years around sales compensation plans. And I think when I first started doing it, we definitely thought about sales compensation plan design as a math problem to solve. And we were working with the Office of Finance because they would say, oh, we have this specific budget. You need to come up with a pay curve or a rate table or a bonus structure that when the reps all hit target, this is what they get paid. And so we would make sure the math all worked. And then at some point in time, maybe 10 years ago, is when we started to think about the idea, at least the progressive people that did comp plan design would think about the idea that there's a human on the other end of this comp plan, and they're motivated in a particular way, and they chat with their peers, and some of the rise of some of the sites of where they start to see what other people make and types of things, more publicly available information, and all the behavioral economists, started to be more popular and write more books. And so we started to think about the behavioral aspect of the plan. Is it motivating? Is it meaningful? Is it simple enough for people to understand? And then I think maybe 5-6 years ago, and we could find the exact date because it's tied to a particular bank that created a plan that was too aggressive. And ultimately their reps, not only, the unforeseen consequence of their actions was not just treating prospects and clients in a particular way or manner, not just immoral, but illegal. And they got in a lot of trouble, for that. And so I think about that as the third leg of the stool of you're trying to create, the math has to work, right? You got to model and cost it and make sure it fits within your structure of your budget. Has to be, good for the reps, win-win. There also has to be a win for prospects and clients and customers. But you touched on an idea here of, for nonprofits, as an example, paying the full boat to the reps, because from a corporate culture standpoint, or who do we want to be in the world, this is important to us, that not-for-profits can take advantage of our products, solutions, and goods in the same way that a for-profit company can, but maybe at a different price point. And why should we penalize the reps or that potential client, just to the corporate good type of thing? And I think that's a perfect example of seeing those three legs, working in harmony. We have a corporate strategy. Your company's for profit, so is mine. We want to pay our reps to go out there and sell good business to the right customers at the right price. At the same time, though, we want to be good citizens in the world and maybe help out people that can't necessarily afford it. So I think that's a great story. And I thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a good lesson for a lot of folks to hear and think about when they design their comp plans. One more question for you. I have a couple of questions I like to ask every guest on the show. And then we'll be at the end of our time together today. What's next for you? You mentioned sales compensation plans this year, pretty big change. You touched upon quotas. We didn't really dig into territories too much, but kind of what's the next big area for you to go tackle there at Mindbody and pull them into the future and get better alignment and better productivity out of that area?
Yeah, my immediate focus is, as I mentioned, we had a complete revamp of our sales compensation plan. So the first tab is probably going to make sure that it checks out, that it's something which is good for the reps, that it's actually motivator. The changes we made, we wanted to be done in a way where we are maximizing business value, and we let the sales teams also know that this is the best of class out there, which is going to maximize how much you can earn, like no caps and everything. It's like how much you perform. The more you perform, that's how much we'll pay you, and the sky is the limit. So probably I'll need to make sure that the math, in fact, does check out, and see how to improve that over the course of the year. And the second would be more on the strategy side. One of the things I love being in sales ops and sales comp is that it throws like different things at you. So there is always a scope of making things better, of finding a small like tweak that is going to make the sales team happier, and your executive leadership team, or your owner in this case, happier, that we are providing, like we are doing more with less. So just leaning on the strategy side and just keep on seeing all the industry best practices and what everyone else is doing out there, and learning from that and seeing how we can change things or make things better, that will create a sales team which is well motivated. They don't want to leave. Basically, we just want these guys to stay here and do more business, especially because I think one thing to mention is that Mindbody and just this industry is an industry which was directly impacted by COVID. A lot of businesses unfortunately shut down and were out of like business, and we're slowly getting out of it. So for us, this is a time when we are getting back to pre-2020 levels. And what we want to do is not just try to go back to those levels, especially now that the whole world is realizing that your well-being, both mental and physical, it's really important, and it's something you should care about. So as the world is thinking about that, how do we do what is best for our teams and the world out there to connect everybody to fitness and wellness? So just, the general strategy there of making things better. So yeah, it's going to be fun year.
Yeah, I like that. I like the idea of continue to sell the plan to the field. Yeah. Put the metrics in place to make sure it's working, adjust as needed, continue to learn best practices and apply them as they come up. But yeah, a tremendous opportunity for the company after probably, like you said, a pretty tough couple of years.
Yeah.
So yeah, best of luck, and hope you take advantage of that.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, two questions I like to ask everybody that comes on the show. Number one, if you could take anybody to lunch in the sales compensation or sales management world, who would that be?
Great question. I'm actually invited to this compensation forum by Concero, which is happening in Miami, I think in April. And as I was going through that list, I saw some amazing leaders coming there. And one that stuck out to me was being in Atlanta, Georgia. This is where Coca-Cola is headquartered as well. Their head of total rewards, I think his name is called Saunders. I don't know him personally, but seeing him on that list and seeing his LinkedIn profile and the fact that he lives in Atlanta, I was like, that might be a good person to catch up with and learn from. Yeah.
I don't know him either. I'll have to go check him out and see what type of ideas they have. Is it a he, or I don't want to get it wrong? Is Sanders a gentleman or a lady?
Yeah, he's a gentleman, Carl Saunders. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know him. I'd be happy to make the introduction. If this podcast gets released before that forum and anybody in the audience knows Carl,
yeah, that'd be
let's
great.
make that LinkedIn introduction to Shiv and let's make that discussion happen.
Yes, please.
Second question. Is there a book, could be sales compensation related, could be general business or management related, that you could recommend to people? I sit and work in my library. I'm always looking to put new books on the shelf, but the audience, I'm sure they're looking for good things to read as well. Any ideas out there for us of the next book to read?
I'm sorry, just let me ask you this. So that is a library behind you, and it's not a Zoom background. Okay, well, good to know. That is amazing.
I will zoom in on the library real quick.
Okay, it is. All right.
I will zoom back in on me.
90% of the times that is a Zoom background. So that is fantastic to see that you have a whole library of
You're
books.
not the first person to ask, but it is an actual library.
Yes, I'm sure. All right. Okay, sorry, back to your question. Okay, is it okay if I recommend two? One is,
sure,
being a data guy, say it with charts. It's a book that is about communication, and I love data, and I think it's more for like people who think that it's tiresome or it's too scary looking into data. How to circumvent that. And one for management is what's it called? I'm not crazy. I'm just not you. And I forget who the author is, but it gets into different personality types and how people react to different things, and how you can not really tailor, like the things that you can keep in mind while talking to like different kinds of people, that will make sure that you're saying things in the best way that that they'll grasp, and it will actually motivate them. So it's also for management, that of course in a team you have all these like different personalities, right? And it's not like you can use the same approach for all of them, even though sales always has like one approach. But like, how can you motivate each of your team member differently so you get the best out of them? Yeah. It's a good book.
Yeah, it sounds like I have not read either of those books. I will definitely go give them a peek. I like the idea of the second one. I find that sometimes communication between different levels in the organization, different business functions, is difficult for people, maybe because they're not understanding how the other person's approaching it, what's important to them, lack of empathy in some way, right? Of, seeing it from your point of view. I told somebody the other day, you meet your boss for a one-on-one for an hour a week and you engage with them, over Slack and email. You're somewhere between 1% and 2% of like their thought process throughout the week. Yeah. And so, what is super important to you may just be a sliver on their radar. And if you feel like it should be super important to them, help them understand that. But don't feel like they're not listening, or that they're not, they don't believe that you're important. You just have to put yourself, in their shoes. Same thing to sales reps I tell all the time, where I'm like, when was the last time you called that prospect? And they're like, 2 weeks ago, I didn't want to bother them. I'm like, 2 weeks ago? Think about how many emails, conversations in Slack, Zoom meetings, other phone calls they may have taken, things that happened in their personal life between now and then. Like, they've forgotten you exist by now. Like, you're not bothering them, right? As long as you're bringing value to the call. Yeah. So I'm definitely going to check those two books out. I think those are some interesting topics. So thank you for sharing that.
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show today. I very much enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you showing up and sharing what you're up to there at Mindbody, and some good ideas for the audience of how to get better at this sales compensation and incentive process.
Yes, it was a great time chatting with you, Justin.